What's up? And welcome back to the Bomberman Retrospective. We have a double feature today, as not only are we going to be looking at Bomberman 94, but also its port to the Genesis, Mega Bomberman. I have an odd familiarity with Mega, but I've never really played 94, so let's get to it before my phone pulls another. The development of Mega is actually very interesting, but 94 came out first, so that's the one we're starting with. That isn't to say 94's development is in any way uninteresting, though. Alongside returning names from past titles, Shinichi Nakamoto finally came back with the milk. He's been surprisingly absent since the NES title, but he returns on this game as a basic game designer. It's got some pretty interesting cut content too. The sprites for both the Louis eggs being destroyed and a flame pass item get loaded into the game's memory but go completely unused, meaning my confusion as to where the item was the whole time was kind of answered, and the Louis eggs just use a normal explosion sprite when blown up. There's also a debug menu that can't normally be accessed, but through some hacking you can replace the sound room and then use the same cheat to get to it. There aren't many interesting options here, but there are unused texturings that would have allowed for more. The most interesting thing for both games has to be the prototypes. In 94 a little less so, because the special edition demo is just a demo of the full game's battle mode with a few beta assets, but the title screen is unendingly interesting to me because I love sprite art and this shit is just beautiful. I imagine it goes unused because it represents the battle mode a lot more than the campaign and could probably be a bit misleading, but the fuck, it would have been a cool Easter egg or something. Mega's prototype is also a demo of the multiplayer, but wholly unique, as not only does it allow 8 players for the first time through just kinda nigga-rigging 2 Genesis multi-taps together, but it wasn't even supposed to be a port of 94 at this stage, instead a completely new game pitched by Factor 5, the same developers behind Rogue Squadron and Turrican. And I mean, they did Lair too, but we don't like to talk about that. It's unknown even to the team themselves why Hudson passed on it to port an older game despite being impressed, although it is clear that this nigga is still very salty though. Instead, Westone was contracted to port the game mostly one-to-one with some questionable aesthetic changes that actually does end up affecting the story a little bit. Okay, so the base plot of the game isn't actually affected that much by the 2 different versions. Both games include the introduction of Bugler, a reoccurring villain throughout the series who has a lot of different localized names. Louis, these weird-ass kangaroo rabbit things that hatch out of eggs and also appear throughout the rest of the series. And spirits that keep Bomber Planet balanced? That's probably the most confusing part out of this, if only because you don't see these 5 spirits at any point, nor does the game itself really mention them outside the manual. You see the spirit portraits that are said to give them power, and them being separated is what causes Bomber Planet to split into 5 pieces, but again, you never really see them, even though they're the planet's guardians, and as far as I'm aware, they never get any type of further elaboration. To be fair, it is cool that this universe just has unexplained celestial beings, but I should at least have some idea of what their purpose actually is. Besides that though, something that isn't stated in either manual is that the other Bombermen actually do try to help at first. In 94, you can see them stationed on the world map at the separate pieces of the planet, but after defeating the first boss, the silhouette of what looks to be Bugler beats the shit out of them and leaves them injured and out of commission for the rest of the game. Unfortunately, Mega doesn't have all the original Bomber colors, as it only allows for 4 players as opposed to 5, so blue was cut and the others were all scrubbed from the single player mode. I know it seems like a small thing to care about, but I love the non-verbal storytelling games of this era are synonymous with. It's really cool to see story beats be portrayed without the characters just straight up talking to one another. And the progression feels more satisfying when you have the visual element of the Bombermen being happier after you beat each world. It doesn't ruin the experience in any way, but it does take some of the personality out of it. Outside of that, the story is really cool though. The Bombers attempting to help at all and getting stumped shows that they really wanted to do something more for this game. And even though some of its lore is confusing and never followed up on, the mystery makes it less easy to write it off like you could with some of the other games. The desire to step things up is something seen throughout the whole game, and the most immediate example you'll have of that is given that it's the last game on the PC Engine and the only game on the Genesis, you'd expect them to go all out for the presentation here. And you wouldn't be wrong, because this game's beautiful as fuck. Once again, colors are vibrant and details are gorgeous. The effects have even been ramped up this time around, which keeps a stronger distinction between worlds. Keeps the game distinct from 93 too, as even though some themes are shared between games, their designs and effects makes them more than just a retread. The heat waves in Aki Aki Mountain. Yeah, this is like the second interruption I've had to make for this section. I don't remember why I thought there was a heat wave in Aki Aki Mountain, but there's not one there. And the water waves in Baku Baku Sea go a long way in not only showing how talented the artists were, but also just how hard they wanted to push the PC Engine for what was the franchise's swan song on the console. It's also, however, the biggest difference between versions. Mega, while not looking bad at all, is definitely a visual downgrade when compared to 94. Colors can be less vibrant at times, and a lot of details and effects are straight non-existent. I wouldn't say it ruins anything, but it does take a lot away from the aesthetic the original was going for. It helps create some confusion too if you jump from Mega to 94 like I did. The music adds to this a little, because while it is fire, some of this shit is completely different depending on the version. It's unknown why, and it's just the first 2 areas, but it also means June got a chance to cook even more than she normally does, so we still eating good. Whether you prefer the chiptune of the PC Engine or the twang of the Genesis, you're gonna be satisfied with this soundtrack. I don't think there's a single song that didn't hit different throughout the whole thing. I already thought the map music in 93 was really good, but then something about this one just fucking spoke to my soul. Some of this shit even had me getting nostalgic. Not for this game, mind you, I never played past the first world in Mega before this video, but for the days where I used to just spend all day watching nothing but reviews and Let's Plays. The only reason I can guess for it is Teddy Rubskin being the one that introduced me to Mega Bomberman and a lot of Sega Genesis games, but whether it actually means something or I'm just fucking weird, this game's music has a strong emotional effect on me, and it's almost instantly moved up right next to Hero in terms of how much I love it. So boom, right? I'm coming from the future cause I left out some pretty important shit while we write in this section. First of which being the box arts, where surprisingly enough, I feel the UK has the best out of the 3. The illustration for 94 is very well drawn, even kind of reminding me of the b-daman toys, but everything else about it is very simplistic. While not really being a bad thing, even in comparison to the special demos box art, it can be a little bland. The NTSC version of Mega is fucking weird. Like many of you, for years, I just assumed this was 90s localizers being 90s localizers, but in actuality, this is a member of the Bomber family. Characters who were specifically created for the battle mode and named by readers of Shogakukan PC Engine magazine in a contest where I just have to mention you could get a fucking speaker with a built-in amplifier just for naming a couple of characters. Many of the Japanese names are portmanteaus, like this one being a fusion of Bomb and Yankee, creating Bonki. In English though, they're given the same naming conventions as the other bombers, just with descriptors instead of colors. The UK box art is the only one that actually has all of them on it, and it's part of why I feel like it's the best one. It basically fuses the art from the others together and creates something that I feel represents the game a lot better and stands out without being confusing like the US art. Now back to the me from like 2 months ago, I think. With these PC Engine games, it seems as though every aspect improves with each release. The gameplay in 93 was really good, even if the balancing gets a little wonky near the end, so it's time to see if this game can end their line in a blaze of glory or a pitiful dud. This game was off to a great start immediately, because unlike the others, you don't start in cement shoes. Outside that, base gameplay stays the same as always, with the main differences coming in Louie and how the game designs its mazes. Louie's are best compared to Yoshi's. They're rideable animal buddies that provide both extra abilities and an extra hit to Bomberman. Depending on the color, the ability is different, ranging from jumping, kicking bombs, or dancing. They can actually be very useful when going through some of the game's later stages, and they stay fairly balanced as they provide a tool that can be used effectively, rather than a straight up advantage. That balanced nature can go for the level design itself too. You could see it as either the evolution or a culmination of what we've gotten before, cause not only do layouts feel more varied, but level gimmicks feel more creative, especially since it's more than just a teleporter that looks slightly different in each one. Each world has its own thing, and some like Akiaki Mountain even have more than one, allowing for not just transportation with its minecarts, but also stage hazards like this angry ass volcano. Hazards like that, alongside the spotlight in Kirakira Castle and the rocking shooting penguins in Yuki Yuki Land, go a long way in keeping you on your feet during gameplay, especially in the moment when you first realize these little niggas aren't just scenery. They're not the only things that can trip you up though, as enemies have become even more varied than before. Bugler's army is not only filled with his cronies, but the brainwashed native creatures of this planet, like I theorized was happening in 93. And this causes a lot of enemy variety and some questionable morality when blowing these niggas up. There's also an extremely high amount this time around, but I'd say most of them are unique enough to stand out from each other, not just graphically, but mechanically. There's almost too many variations to keep track of, but a few of my favorites are Poka Poka, a cool rabbit looking dude whose only real purpose is throwing hands, Bandit, a cool little masked dude who jumps over your blast unless you catch him during his anime speech, and Bobo, who's just my favorite brand of childish ass character design but doesn't actually have anything special. The variety carries over to the bosses, as just like 93, each one is unique, which especially applies to this game because you get shit like a banana being remote controlled by a monkey, a giant bat in Legosi cosplay, an Ice Queen, and Bugler's cool ass dragon mech. Their patterns start simple but increase in difficulty as the game progresses, and I'd say it all feels fairly balanced this time around, even if a lot of them have this same homing projectile move. That goes for more than just the bosses, as I feel like this game as a whole has a smoother increase in difficulty than 93. Now, 93's difficulty didn't come completely out of nowhere at the end, but it was still abrupt compared to the rest of the game. 94, however, provides a much smoother increase from its easier early stages to its more difficult endgame, with the middle of the game providing a better transition into its more difficult technical aspects. That's why I kinda love this game. The more difficult moments genuinely feel like a skill issue rather than unfortunate game design. I found myself critiquing my playstyle when I died rather than getting insanely pissed, and that's the type of difficulty that I strive for. Generally, 94 and Mega Bomberman have what might be the best gameplay so far, and the only thing keeping that statement from being more confident is my dumbass forgetting that Super Bomberman came out before this game did. It's definitely the best out of the PC Engine trilogy, and it's mostly treated as such as we go into the... This game's legacy isn't too dissimilar from 93, the big difference being that I didn't hear about it nearly as much. Again, my introduction to it all was a random Teddy Ruxpin video, and even that was for Mega, and not 94. It's especially strange because whenever it is mentioned, it's held in nothing but high regard, and it's one of the lucky few games to still get ports, ending up in the exact same places as 93, and even one where it didn't. As in 2008, the game was made available on the Japanese exclusive FOMA line of flip phones. Released as Bomberman 08, I can best assume it's more of a remake than a straight up port. Less because of the new graphics or boss attacks, and more because one of the only videos I can find of gameplay states that the movement feels different, which would likely mean that this is a completely different engine. Even though this version is super obscure and the only way to play appears to be the homebrew Windows Phone version, it's such a cool little oddity that I wish got released worldwide. That's the same for Mega Bomberman 2, as despite being fully translated, the game has just never seen a re-release, even on the Sega Genesis minis. I don't see why, as it isn't a particularly bad port, just a little visually compromised. The core game itself is still 94, and since the gameplay was great from the jump, I'd say you'd be satisfied no matter which version you went for. The prices for both don't seem to be too crazy, most of the time. I'd love to end this by saying that I'm excited to see what comes next, especially with Shinichi Nakamoto returning, but unfortunately we have to backtrack a couple of months because I'm a dumbass. I'll see you niggas next time.